Hey, everybody. Exciting topic today, talking about the future of networking. Securing devices and data on today's network, if not broken, is pretty difficult. And I'm here to chat with Colin, founder, CTO at Sign. Love the name of your company, by the way, Colin. Nice to have you here, live to the audience. Maybe introduce yourself and who is at Sign?
You got it. So a little bit about me. I've been in networking for a very long time. I actually calculated 40 years. And
Wow.
when I started young, that's my excuse. Everything when I started was electromechanical and a telephone exchange. So yeah,
You are old.
uh,
Yes.
I'm very old. But I did start at 16, so fair enough. Um, and yeah, I've been in telcos, British Telecom, banks, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank. And in the early 2000s, I moved over to Silicon Valley with Juniper Networks. And from there, I realized I was actually a startup guy that had just been stuck in large enterprises most of my life. And 4 years ago, we started AdSign. And the idea essentially was to change the way the internet works by adding a new abstraction layer where people can own their data and exchange the data without any prying eyes. So end-to-end encrypted by default, and you can share data around if you want to share it. And so we'd actually had the idea 10 years ago, and we had to go write some software, and we knew it wouldn't scale. Coming from telco, you have a good feeling of whether things are going to scale or not, and it wasn't going to scale. We had to wait. So that's why we waited 6 years, and it's been quite a ride for the last 4 years.
Quite a ride indeed. You call yourself on your profile an internet optimist, which is, I'm an internet pessimist. So I guess we're going to balance out
Yeah,
yin
we
and
need to
yang
balance
here.
yourself out. Yeah.
Why are you optimistic about the future of networking and maybe IP in general, let's say, or the building
So
blocks that make up
yeah,
IP?
so I think networks definitely change the world, and we're about to change the world again. There's no doubt about that. But I also think we're at a crossroads, and the crossroads is to do with AI. So we hear lots of doom and gloom about AI, and
Mm,
I think what we're missing very often in the conversation is actually a networking problem. It's not an AI problem. So if you want to have these really nice experiences of AIs helping you and all the rest of it, then you better make sure that AIs can talk to each other and communicate nice and easily and effectively. Otherwise, mega corporation, and pick your least favorite one, will do all that integration and networking behind the scenes, and they'll be able to monitor you and influence you in even more ways that you could be influenced at the moment.
mm,
And that's a rather terrifying thought. So by being an internet optimist, it means people, entities, and things, and that includes AIs, can communicate together, give brilliant and amazing services and experiences without prying eyes, and it's all in the control of the consumer, rather than somebody trying to influence you. So that stuff is all possible. We've seen networking do this in the past. I mean, it was
mm.
a few years ago, right? 50 years ago. I think next year is when the internet was really born. And it's about time we had a new abstraction layer. There's nothing wrong with the underlying network, I don't think. We just need an abstraction layer. And there's software developers have had abstraction layers for a long time, but we've never had a universal abstraction layer in networking. So that's really why I'm an optimist. I know this stuff is possible, and I
Mm.
think magical experiences can come out of
Wow, we're already talking about magic. That's fantastic. Now
it.
let's dive in. Explain the concept of networking 2.0 as something you use quite a bit on your website.
Yeah.
What's the big idea there? What's new, different, better than, I guess, 1.0? Is that where we
Yeah,
are?
1.0 is what we do at the moment. It's 1.0. I'm a network engineer, no big surprise. It's very fiddly, very fiddly. So you can have a big idea as
That's a
a
technical
corporate.
term, fiddly. It's a very
Fiddly,
British term,
yeah,
but
it's
yeah.
very technical. Yeah, like opening up ports and setting up
Right.
VPNs and getting keys in the right place. It's all really fiddly. And if you're an enterprise architect, you architect on the big scale, and then you get tripped up by some network engineer saying you can't do that, and then that's why projects fail. And that seems to be very consistent, right? We come up with really good ideas, and then we actually can't implement them on the network, and that's because we haven't got an abstraction layer that makes this stuff easy. So that's what networking 2.0 is. It doesn't replace anything in the IP layer. It's leveraging IP, so you don't have to unlearn anything. It's still IP, and they actually use TCP IP, interestingly. But you have a new address scheme that really doesn't matter whether it's on a private network or a public network, and that address scheme is basically called an @sign, hence the name of the company. And it's just a unique string. So my @sign is @Colin. And if you want to get data to me, then you just say @Colin. And I could be on any IP address. Nobody really cares what IP address I'm on. You just need to be able to speak to @Colin. But networking is, obviously about addresses and networks. So addresses is covered by an @sign. You want to make sure, as I said, everything communicating between @signs is private. So that means that I have to look after my keys, and I own my keys and you don't, and nobody else does. So everything is private. And the last thing about networking 2.0 that's really critical and gives rise to really interesting sort of causal effects is I know who you are before I have to give an answer. So you have to cryptographically prove that if you're @Evan, you have to cryptographically prove to me that you are @Evan, and then I can give you whatever answer I want to give. And I don't have to give the same answer to @Sarah, my wife. So if you wanted to look up my location, and Sarah wanted to look up my location, the location in the protocol that we use is location @Colin. If you look that up, and then maybe I'll give you my full mailing address so you can come visit. And if Sarah wanted to look it up, she could look it up, and I'd just give her @home, right? I'm just at home. So context is really, really important. So at a high level, enterprise architecture level, you can have these concepts and you can draw network diagrams of @signs and what they do and how they interact. But when you need to transpose that onto a real IP network, everything will work. We know it will work because all connectivity is outbound from the device. All connectivity is end-to-end encrypted from the device to whatever the device is at the other end. So it removes all the complexity, essentially. And it means that you don't have to worry about 1918 addresses, VPNs, firewalls. You can have firewall rule sets I really like. Deny all inbound. That's a really good firewall rule set. And yet everything will still work. I spoke to a number of banks over the last few years, and they have to deal with the 500,000 firewall rules. No, there's no way on earth that's secure, right? It's an action waiting to happen because it's just too difficult. We haven't had this abstraction layer, and that's what networking 2.0 is. It's a new way of looking at things, but it doesn't change anything at the base level. It just makes it easier.
Wow, an easy button for the network. That is exciting. So you have an SDK, I presume, that network builders can create these new class of networking products. And how does that work on the commercial business side?
Yeah, so we actually, at the beginning, what we were waiting for was a in-memory database that could be a directory. And we are also waiting for devices to be able to cut their own cryptographic keys. If you roll your head back to 10 years ago, cutting a cryptographic key on a cell phone was, it was a waiting event. These days, you can get a SIM card to cut a cryptographic key for you, and they're doing it under a second. What we needed to do to join those two things up was a protocol. So we built a new ground-up protocol. It's what I like to say, the rudest protocol in the world, and it's essentially if you get a bit wrong, then it will just drop you, which is fine, I think. And the other thing is, it's probably one of the most simple protocols. Essentially, the rule from the beginning was, if you can do it in application code, it doesn't belong in the protocol. So it's very lightweight. So we had the protocol, and obviously I was excited because I'm a protocol guy, right? And everybody would like to write to a protocol. It turns out nobody wants to write to a protocol. There's like maybe 4 people in the universe that wants to write to a protocol. They want to use an SDK. And in our first year, we hired a bunch of interns for the summer, and they all told us loudly, we want an SDK. So we have a number of SDKs. And the SDK is the place where we do the encryption. The protocol doesn't care about encryption. It just moves strings around. And that means if you don't like our choice of algorithms, you can plug in your own. Everything's open source. So you can go to our open source repo and GitHub and see it all there. And the way we make money is pretty simple. So we sell names. We call them @signs. You need to have an address on this higher level network, and you can buy a name from us. So it's that easy. There's some services as well that you might like to run yourself, or we can run them for you. If you want us to run them for you, then obviously we can charge you for that as well. But you don't have to. It's completely optional if you want to run services yourself or not.
Fantastic. And this is an open source project or program or
Yeah,
approach. How do you look at
yeah,
this? There have been fits and starts with open source and networking, but you seem to be taking, an open source tack, which sounds great.
yeah. So my co-founder Kevin came from the world of Sun Microsystems, and
Mm,
Bill Joy at Sun always said there's many smart people in Sun, but there's many more smart people outside of Sun.
mm.
And as a small startup in the early days, we realized that there'd be lots of people interested in this, but we couldn't hire them all. So actually having an open source project meant other people would look at it, throw some sticks at it, and say, this is terrible. What about this? Here's a vulnerability. Have you thought about that? And to be honest, I don't trust software that is not open source because I want to look at the source code. So we always have been open source, and we will always be open source because it's just better for the community to be able to contribute, and it's obviously better if you're running something and it's very critical. You better have ability to look at the source code. So.
Brilliant. Well, that sounds intriguing. And, we talk about the Internet of Everything. I think that's
Yeah.
one of your missions. And when it comes to, let's say, IoT today, it's a challenge. You talk to folks deploying it or telcos. I mean, the provisioning, the addressing, the management, the security. I mean, it becomes kind of a nightmare as you talk about, a large scale network. It sounds like this is one potential solution.
I think so. Yeah, it gives you a new design pattern that you can apply to IoT and a number of other things. But where we've got pulled in is definitely IoT. Often when you're deploying IoT devices in a commercial world, you're deploying them to a network you don't actually own. And so that could be like you're deploying cellular devices. You don't own the cellular network. You have no idea what IP address that's going to give you. And our abstraction layer just doesn't care. I mean, everything's going to work because everything's connected outbound. You don't really need to worry about the IP address. As long as it has one and can see the internet, everything's going to work. Which gives rise to use cases where you can set something up and then ship it and expect it just to work when it gets plugged in, which is not normally the way networking works. So.
To say the least, yes, it's the bane of my existence at home these days. And so you also talk about a green approach to networking. Tell us more about that because data center efficiencies and green tech is all the rage for obvious reasons. What's the value add there?
Yeah, essentially, when you deploy a networking 2.0 infrastructure, lots of things are already sort of handled for you, like your VPNs and static IP addresses, and the way the networking world has solved those things. And I mean, they've always been problems, right? The way we've solved them is put a box on top of a box on top of a box. So we went to a trade show not so long ago, and they were tracking cars, fine. And you look in the trunk, and there's a stack of boxes, right? So there's a modem, then there's a VPN, then there's a firewall, and then eventually at the bottom there's a PC. That's all sucking power. And you essentially with networking 2.0, you just don't need all those things. It's you can just run it in the application, and as long as you've got an IP connection, you can remove all of that stuff because you've already got a secure connection. It's encrypted end to end. There are no ports open, so there's no point having a firewall because there are no ports open. And away you go. One of the things, if you've got another use case, a really interesting use case is 5G backhauled Wi-Fi hotspots for campuses. We're seeing a lot of this, and you may well have a stack of 5 or 6 devices, on the pole or on a pedestal underneath. you actually don't need all of that equipment. You only need actually the Wi-Fi access point and the backhaul. And if you can do the rest in software using a Network 2.0 approach, then obviously your footprint goes down. And at the other end, where the data center is, where you had all those other devices that they had to connect to, obviously you don't need those anymore. So that's how you can just remove the hardware footprint, which obviously reduces cost. But where the real cost is actually in people like you, and sounds like you, me and you, configuring stuff. Yeah, we cost money, and if that stuff's static and is dealt with a higher abstraction layer, then obviously there's some significant cost savings to be had there as well.
Fantastic. So as you know, there's sort of a military industrial complex around networking. There's only a few big global vendors, although lots of niche and other use cases. But how do you see some of those folks adopting or coming on board, or is it too early to say at this juncture?
Well, I can say that I worked with, I worked at Juniper for a number of years, and I worked with a number of colleagues at Cisco. They're definitely intrigued. At ONUG last week, actually went over to the Cisco booth. Cisco were there and said, what are you up to? And they said, what are you up to? So they came over, and one of their engineers came over, and he was a little speechless because, does this mean I've got to unlearn everything I've done before? Like, no, not at all. You just need to look at it from a different angle. We've had follow-up since. So I think it's intriguing. And there's obviously value for their customers. And as soon as their customers see value, then obviously, that's how the flywheel gets started. And we see that in IoT, but there's no reason why enterprise IT and anybody else who's got cloud infrastructure shouldn't be using this stuff. It just makes sense.
Yeah, it's about solving problems, and you seem to have created quite the exquisite Swiss Army knife. So
it really is a Swiss Army knife.
Well
it's an SDK. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you can imagine it, we can probably make it. So
fantastic. Any upcoming events, partnerships? You just had ONUG. That's a fantastic community. I'm sure it was really eye-opening discussions there. What else are you looking forward to over the next few weeks, last couple months of the year?
Yeah, my next trip is actually on Friday. We're going to Barcelona to the Smart Cities Conference there. We went to IoT event in Barcelona last year and forged a whole bunch of relationships that have been really interesting through this year, actually in the LoRaWAN space and the remote gateway space. We will be continuing those. We have a software release coming up of what we call SSH no ports. So this is this is sort of unusual. So we had a demo which basically showed how you could SSH into a device without having any ports open. And the demo's great, but the demo turned into, like, we'd show it and they're like, I'm interested in that Network 2.0 stuff, but that SSH no ports thing, we want that. We want that now. So, as a young company, you got to listen to your customers. So we've actually turned that into a product. So you can go to noports.com and get yourself a copy of SSH no ports. Again, it's using networking 2.0 principles. You don't need to ever specify an IP address. You just say, this is my @ sign, this is the @ sign I want to connect to, this is the device, and you'll get connected to an SSH key. But if you scan that device, you actually won't see any ports open. So unless you've got the right cryptographic keys, you won't be able to see anything. The way we do that is bind to localhost. So nothing's externally bounded. So it's a real neat trick. It's been around for a while, but we've made it foolproof, and you can use it for remote access and port forwarding and anything else we want to use. So watch out for new releases of that. We'll be announcing new releases of that and some other fun things in that space at noports.com. And there's a whole bunch of other events we're up to, but I'm going to focus on smart cities for the moment.
Well, fantastic use case, and congratulations on all the success. What do you tell your friends and family who aren't in the business what you do? You're deep in the tech stack here. How do you explain @ sign to them?
Well, it really depends on who I'm speaking to. So if there's
somebody who's not technical,
somebody not technical, we just want to make the internet better.
Okay.
We,
Well,
I
that's a
mean,
nice way to
that's it.
describe it.
Yeah, we don't want companies looking over your shoulder and try to influence you. Nobody wants that, I don't think. Even the people that are doing that don't want to do it anymore. They want to be connected to the customer directly, and if the customer trusts them, then the customer can tell them directly, like, I hate this or I like this. And I think that's a much better world where your customers are in control, and you have to provide a good service for them to trust you to be able to give you that data. You don't need to snoop at all. You get better data if you're not snooping, because I was interested in a new car, and I've got a new car now, and that's 2 years later, and I'm still getting adverts in new cars. Like, what a waste of money! I wish we had to go to the advertisers and say, yeah, I'm not interested in that, but what I'm really interested is in this. That's the world, I think, where I think we should be heading to, and that's why I'm such an internet optimist.
Wonderful. Well, wonderful mission. Congrats on all the success and good luck as we approach the end of the year. Thanks so much, Colin. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for the time,
And
man.
thanks everyone for watching. Reach out to Colin at @sign with any questions or comments. Take care.